Happy New Year if I haven't spoken to you yet. I'm excited to give you a sneak peek of what's coming next. I'll talk towards the end about when the next release is, so I'll give you a pretty good idea of what's coming. So before I get started, I'm going to quickly go over what we have. I'm going to probably spend 5 to 10 minutes at most on getting everybody on the same page before I go in and talk about the new functionality, which we're very excited about. So just to frame this whole presentation, I'm going to focus on DESTINI Estimator, which was released commercially last April at our annual conference. Estimator in combination with Profiler are referred to as the DESTINI suite. So DESTINI Profiler, DESTINI Estimator. Profiler is our virtual planning solution aimed at the front end of the project when there's a lot of uncertainty. That uncertainty typically leads to a lot of churn, a lot of time, a lot of back and forth between the owner, the architect, and the contractor, and really that's where Profiler is a strong tool. At some point, the project gets on the train tracks. There is a budget, there is a design direction, and the challenge becomes how do you keep the project within the budget and delivered in the amount of time that everyone agreed it needed to be designed and constructed within. So that's where Estimator comes into play. Estimator was developed in partnership with one of our largest customers, Suns Construction in Tempe, Arizona. The basis of why they approached us to develop a new solution was that they felt that the world was changing. Owner expectations over the years have dramatically changed. In most cases, we're no longer in a hard bid world. We're more of a negotiated world. In the negotiated world, owners are looking to the GC to help them set that budget and then manage the design team and the construction process to make sure that we stay within that budget. So even if there isn't a GMP at the front end, that first number that you put in front of the owner is obviously really important because it's something that you're going to get to live with for the remainder of the project. They're also seeing a lot more collaboration between the members of the design and construction team throughout the life of the project. So it's no longer just about putting together a cost. It's really about how you can work with the design team during the pre-construction and construction phases of a project to make sure that the design quality is maintained and is not compromised by budget challenges, but the project stays on budget. Although the world in which most of you in pre-construction live is still a 2D world, Sunt's comment to us was that the world again is changing. Yes, 2D is here and likely to be here for a long, long time, but they are seeing more models. They're seeing BIM being handed to them from the architects. The challenge with pre-construction utilizing those models is the fact that oftentimes the tools that are on the market are complicated, or they only work for 3D extraction. So one of their big challenges to us was how do we create a new platform that enables a lot more transparency, a lot more collaboration, works with 2D, supports 3D, and becomes a tool that enables them to deliver what they need to deliver, but attract and retain the best talent within the industry. So there's a lot to DESTINI Estimator. We've added a lot of functionality since the commercial launch back in April, and I'm not going to go into all of it. On the screen I have part of what we cover in training. We call these modules in training. You buy the product as a whole, but this will give you a good idea of what's in the product. What I'm going to do is play about a 2-minute little video just to get everybody on the same page as to what are the big elements within Estimator, and then I'm going to change gears and focus on what's coming to address some of those needs defined by Sunt. Okay. Oops. I guess it would help if I started at the beginning. Get back. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so the little video is going to start by opening an estimate that was actually created in DProfiler. You can use Estimator without DProfiler or in combination with DProfiler. The basic idea is there is an estimating window in which each row represents an item of cost. Each column represents either a system-defined piece of data, like an item's description, unit price, unit of measure, or a user-defined item of data, such as a classification. Inside this window, the user can get rid of columns if they don't want to see a particular column. They can organize the estimate by dragging columns up and arranging them at the top so that you can very quickly see what's in Division 1 or Division 3 or Division 7. You can also associate multiple types of classification with every item in the estimate so that you can very quickly go backwards and forwards between one way of looking at the data and another. You can also store these in quickly accessible layouts so that the user can quickly go from one layout to another. On the left-hand side of the user interface, we have what's called the filter tree. The filter tree enables us to, as the name implies, filter the estimate. So currently we're looking at every item within the estimate, and the total is about $28 million. As we click on nodes within the tree, the total in the lower right-hand corner is going to reflect what items are currently visible or being filtered in the estimate view. The filter tree is completely configurable, so you can break things down by building, followed by classification scheme. If the owner asks you to track owner furnished versus GC furnished, you can create a column, and then you can use the filter tree as a way of organizing and breaking down the estimate. Just like the estimate layouts, you can name these filters so that you can quickly go backwards and forwards between one way of filtering the estimate and another way of filtering the estimate. One of the other big things that Sant talked to us about was reporting. So inside Estimator, there is a full-blown reporting engine, just like you have in DProfiler, just like you have in other estimating platforms. However, what they told us was at the 11th hour, those reports are not flexible enough to meet most of the owner's needs. The owner will throw a curveball in at the last minute, and the estimate ends up leaving the estimating platform, moves into Excel, where the estimator can customize the report. Unfortunately, they then continue to make changes in the Excel file, and the estimate ends up never going back into the estimating platform. So inside Estimator, we have an embedded Excel window in which Estimator will create data in whatever workbook you have loaded that enables you to use Excel for reporting values from the estimate so that you can use the flexibility of Excel for reporting without the worry of actually losing the estimate. Okay. And I apologize. I'm click happy this morning, I guess. Okay. Inside the estimate window, you can load whatever Excel files you have. The last piece that I'll cover is the ability to load multiple estimates and run comparisons. Back to Sunt's, the world is changing. The owner wants more insight. The design team wants more insight into what has changed between design iterations as it relates to the estimate. So inside Estimator, you can load as many estimates as you want, and then you can compare estimates side by side. There are abilities to load past projects, so you can compare where is this project relative to, say, a past office project or data center. You can escalate the entire estimate for time or for location. In this particular example, we've actually loaded a baseline estimate with 2 VE options. There are then features and functions inside Estimator that enable you to review what has happened across these 3 estimates. You can compare the data that the estimator has been tracking, so the skin increase between option 1 and option 2, or between SD and DD. And you can use this as a communication tool to the design team. You can also start to side-by-side compare what are the costs across these three estimates. You can do the same with your indirects. You can also start to drill down and look at the costs, say, by 16 division CSI, and compare, say, what's the difference in division 3 or division 8, again, so that you can communicate what has happened. Finally, you can actually start to drill down to a high degree of detail to say what is happening at the line item or at the detailed level. So this particular window will show you the estimate broken down by whatever columns you currently have dragged out, and then it will highlight the variances between the three estimates. It will also use some intuitive color coding, where green is a big positive variance, dark red is a negative variance, and you can customize these colors. And then there are two modes that you can run these comparisons in: percentage change against the baseline or total cost change against the baseline. And then finally, you can go down within a specific division and look at the changes that occurred at every single property of every single line item. Again, giving you more insight to have more of a conversation with the design team. Okay, I'm going to switch gears. So that's what's in the base product. What I'm going to show you now is sort of the next evolution, which was this request from Sant and from others. How do we integrate takeoff into the estimating process so that instead of having one tool for 2D extraction, another tool for 3D extraction, then typically using some middleware like Excel for manipulating quantities, and then a fourth tool, the estimating platform, in the way that we have historically moved things backwards and forwards was copy and paste, which we all know leads to errors. So how do we integrate all of that together? So what I'm going to show you today is part of a partnership we entered into with Autodesk. So the window on the right is an embedded Navisworks window. The window in the middle is our estimate window. The window on the left is our filter tree. So what I'm going to start by doing is coming over to the takeoff window, and I'm going to tell it that I want to open a document. You can either open a 2D document like a PDF or a JPEG or a PNG file, or you can open a Navisworks file. We support all of the native file formats that Navis provides: NWDs, NWCs, NWFs. I'm going to start this demo by bringing in a PDF. All right, so the first thing I'm going to have on the PDF, this is a typical kind of floor plan, and I'm going to fly at a fairly high level. I'm not going to go into all of the details. This particular version is hot off the presses. Our R&D group would probably say it's still on the presses. So some of the things I'm going to show you are incomplete, but most of it is being finished up as I speak. So the basic idea is I have an image. I'd actually scaled this ahead of time, but you can define 2 points to define the scale on the image. And then we have the ability that you can do takeoffs directly in the tool. So for example, you can define things like the line color. You can define things like the fill color. So maybe just as an example, let's select one of these guys and let's take off an area. So I'm going to sketch an area down here, and I'm going to kind of come down and sketch. I could zoom in, but just because we're going to do a quick demo, I'm going to keep it at this resolution. So you can sketch an area. We also have the ability of defining what we call takeoff items. So takeoff items are pre-configured patterns, colors, properties that you as the user would define. So I'm going to click on one that I've set up ahead of time called carpet, and I'm going to take off another area. So I'm going to come up to one of these rooms. You can tell I'm doing a demo. I'm not being particularly exact. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a line. So I'm going to draw a line takeoff maybe to represent some partitions. We give the user hotspots, so you can click on the corners of whatever it was that you drew before, and it will automatically snap to 90 degrees. So right now I've got two areas and a line. Every one of these objects has properties associated with it. So at the bottom, for the line that I've got selected, it'll give me the properties associated with that line. So one of the properties is the height of the line. So this is analogous to telling it to compute the surface area of a wall represented by that line that's 8 feet tall, so that we can actually use that quantity when we're entering costs. We can also do the same thing with the areas. So for any of these areas, we can actually look at both the properties, the drawing information, and then later any costs that we've actually tied to that quantity. All right, so we've introduced two areas and a line. What I'm going to do is pick on one of these, and I'm going to start to map that takeoff quantity to an item in my estimate. So I'm going to come over to the estimate window, and I'm going to go into the database that I'm currently connected to. And I'm going to find a line item representative of a partition. And I'm going to use one of these 1-hour partitions. What it will show me is an image of what I'm using as the takeoff. And then below it, it will give me those properties associated with that item that I drew. And then on the right, it will give me the values that I can type in order to quantify or take off that particular 1-hour rated wall. So I can still type in a value. Alternatively, I can use the quantity of what was drawn by simply grabbing it and dropping it over that quantity takeoff item. And then if I click OK, what will happen in the background is that item is added into the estimate. At any point, if I come back and pick on, say, that line, and maybe move this corner, so if I came down, you'll notice that this quantity will actually change. So if I was to click again, that quantity changes every time I make a modification to the takeoff item. So what this enables you to do is, if you're in a meeting and the owner says, what is the impact of moving that partition, you can quickly make that change and see what the impact is on both the cost and the quantities. All right, the next thing we're going to do is use the area that I sketched over here, also to take off a carpet line item. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to find in the database a line item for carpet. The database that I'm currently connected to comes free with the product. It's about an 1100 line item database. Each item in the database, and I'll show you this in just a little bit, has multiple classification schemes mapped to it. On this particular case, I'm going to grab the area of that carpet, and again, I'm going to drag it up. So what I've actually done now is I have two line items in the estimate associated with two different takeoff items. I'm going to quickly come over to the filter tree, and I'm going to filter I'm going to set up a filter tree in this particular case based on the Uniform Map classification scheme. You'll notice when I click on this empty folder, what will happen is both the line and the area that have been mapped to costs will actually disappear. So there's a very quick way of showing you which items in the takeoff window have currently no costs associated with them. Conversely, if I click on interiors in the estimate, it will show you the items that are currently in the estimate that are mapped to Division C interiors. If I expand this, you'll notice that my carpet is in my interior finishes versus my wall, which is in my interior construction. So if I go backwards and forwards, you'll notice in this window it will filter the estimate, and in this window it will also filter the takeoff. So if I go backwards and forwards, you can kind of see that. Now, it will always leave in here any item that currently doesn't have costs, so that I can actually at any point go in and pick an item and come up and add it. If it wasn't here, you wouldn't be able to pick it, and it may be a confusing way of being able to actually get to that takeoff item. All right, I'm going to quickly move to models. So the basic idea of defining an object, a takeoff object, an area, align, account, associating properties, area, volume, perimeter, number of points, height, and the ability to map those to costs holds whether I'm doing a 2D takeoff or whether I'm doing a model-based takeoff. So in the model window, I'm going to come over and I'm going to say to actually load a Navisworks file. And what it will do is load this, this model, and once it's loaded, we'll be able to zoom out. All of the mouse controls that, if anybody's used Navisworks, that you're used to using, the zoom in, zoom out, those are still in play. On the left-hand side, I can also now use the filter tree for not just picking properties in the estimate. I can use it for picking properties of objects in the window, in the takeoff window. So if I had associated a user-defined property with my 2D takeoff items, I can use that in the filter tree as a way of arranging my carpet versus my VCT versus my other flooring materials. The same is true in the model. So in the model, I have properties like the layer. I have properties like the type. And I'm going to use those temporarily for reorganizing the tree. As soon as I click on level 1, you'll notice that some of the geometry in the model disappeared. If I click on level 2, you'll see some of the other geometry disappear and the roof geometry reappear. If I start to expand and click on things like the curtain wall, I can very quickly come back over to the takeoff window, pick items within the window that I want. So let's just use 3 of these as an example. And just like we did before, I can come in and add a line item. So if I was to come down here and type in curtain wall and type in standard, the same dialog that we got in 2D will also appear in 3D. So again, I can use the areas of the items that I picked as a way of quantifying the line item that I want mapped to those items of cost. I can also use it as a way of picking other objects. So in this particular case, I'm going to pick everything. There's some shortcut keys just like you have in other tools. Control A will pick everything in the window. And this time, instead of adding in a line item, I'm actually going to take off an assembly. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to look through my database of assemblies, and I'm going to take off a slab on grade. So in the slab on grade takeoff, the same idea holds. We have an image representing the items that I picked, along with those items' properties. Just like I mentioned for 2D takeoff, for line item takeoff, any of these values you can type. When I make a change at the top, it will show me changes to the line items at the bottom. I can grab things like the area of the slab to answer this particular question, and then it will give me an indicator showing that I'm actually using that parametric variable. I can scroll down through this list of questions. So I can come in here and say, all right, I manually counted 24 exterior columns and 48 interior columns. And then maybe I drag the perimeter in order to take off the perimeter based on the area of what's been drawn. And then I can say OK. What we'll actually see as we do this is items being introduced into the estimate. You'll notice those 2 items that were mapped to 2D objects that don't actually know what level they're on or what item type they are, or show up as yellow. But you'll notice if I go up to the panel, we see the curtain wall line item versus the assembly for the slab. If the model is constructed incorrectly, so one of the things that we've seen before, so if I was to maybe come up to doors as an example, and these are light in color, and I apologize, but let's just say I bring these up. I can bring up, say, the properties of one of these objects. You can actually change the property. So if it was modeled with a generic wall or a generic door, and you need a specific type of door, you can change the value directly. And as soon as I hit enter on the left-hand side, you're actually going to see that that item appear. So up in the top of the tree, if I click on it, you now see that door. If I go back down to the other doors and I click on Control A, you'll notice that door is no longer in that category. So you can also create your own properties and use those in the filter tree. So instead of just taking what the architect has and trying to figure out, well, you know, how do I take advantage of these generic doors or generic walls or generic roof, you can actually go in and recategorize the data based on how you want to use it. You can also use combinations of 2D and 3D. And the way that you interact in 2D is the same as the way that you interact in 3D. All right, so let's go to the next piece, the last piece, which is, okay, now you've got a model. You've mapped some of the costs to that model, but the architect now gives you a new iteration of the design. So the way that we handle that is you can come back in and load the new NWD file. And what it will do is it will put the application into what we call review mode. So if you click on Update Estimate, before it applies those changes to your estimate, it will show you what has been added, what has been removed, what has been modified, along with the impact of that modification. If you don't trust what the architect has given you, you can tell it to remove model associations, which will leave your estimate exactly the way that it was at the last iteration, but it enables you to go back in and remap and recondition that model, as opposed to just saying update the model based on whatever changes the architect has made. And then you can tell it to automatically create a new estimate so that those changes that you're going to make don't impact the estimate that you were working on before. So for this example, I'm going to click on Update Estimate. And it will bring you up a review window. And in that window, it's going to show you currently things that have been modified. So in this particular case, some of the curtain wall that we selected was changed. So it will give you, if you had a list of line items, it would color code these just like our variants or comparisons in the video that I showed at the beginning. Dark red would be big negative variants, dark green would be big positive variants, and then shades in between would either be positive or negative, but of a lesser extent. At the top, we can look at, well, what was removed from the estimate. So in this particular case, it looks like some of the slabs were removed, and it will show me the quantities that are being removed from the estimate if I apply those removals. And then lastly, in this particular case, there was nothing added to the model, but if there were objects added into the model, it would show me those objects that have actually been introduced on this design iteration. If I click on Cancel, it'll leave my estimate mapped to my old model and my old takeoffs. If I go through and click on OK, it will apply whatever changes I had told it to apply in that modified and added list. So I'm going to click OK. It's OK. And then it'll ask me to save the estimate. All right, that is the basic of 50,000 feet of what's coming. So the integration of 2D takeoff, 3D takeoff. the ability that you can drag and drop takeoff items over items of cost for quantifying your estimate. You can click on items in the estimate and it will visually show you what's tied to them. You can visually pick on items in the takeoff and it will show you what costs are mapped to them. And then as things change, there's this review mode that will enable you to see the impact of the change before you apply the change to the estimate. All right. So our schedule for this is that we just released a full-blown release at the beginning of this month that included full-blown assemblies and unit price buildup. So if you do self-perform work, you can define your rates based on crews and resources within the crew, and then you can apply that crew to a particular line item and define a production rate. We also now support rate tables, so you can regionalize those crews simply by moving them from one location to another. The plan for the version that I have is our 2016 2.0 release that I've highlighted in red. It's anticipated to be released at the end of this quarter, so just over 2 months away. There is no additional cost for any of these incremental changes that we're adding into the product. The price is the same. If you're already a customer, you'll get these as part of the standard release that we provide all of our customers. All right, with that, I'm going to stop. I was a little bit longer than 30 minutes, but hopefully everybody got the idea. And I will open up if anybody wants to take a deeper dive. We'd be more than happy to schedule a follow-on one-on-one webinar or go to meeting with you.
And the first one being, is there a file size limit to the Navisworks file that Estimator will accept?
I mean, technically no, but I suspect everybody on the phone knows if you get multi-gigabyte Navisworks files, it can take a long time to open in Navis. We do not load all of the data in Navis into memory at once. So if you can open it in Navis, you should be able to open it inside Estimator. My recommendation would not be loading multi-gigabyte Navisworks files in Navisworks full stop. And there isn't anything lost by partitioning out the files. You can load as many of those as you want and perhaps work on the takeoff areas that make the most sense based on where you are in the estimating process. But if you so desire, you can load a huge Navisworks file.
Thank you. And then can all quantified items be seen in a list somewhere in the interface?
So there is not currently in the version that I have a full-blown list. However, you can use the filter tree as that list. So I mentioned that there are properties associated with everything that you take off. So you can actually use the filter tree as a list of the items that you have, and then as you click on the items in the filter tree, you can visually see those in the takeoff window. There are some ongoing discussions. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but we have what we call our industry advisory group, which is made up of 13 companies that are currently giving us feedback on the product. We've had that in place for about a year. And one of the items that has come up is the ability to provide a very quick list of the quantities for review purposes, and that is something that we're seriously looking at. I just don't know whether it's going to make it before the end of the release cycle. So if it's not in this version, it will be coming soon.
And then does Destiny Estimator allow multiple users to log into the same estimate at the same time to alter it?
It does not. Again, the advisory group, there was half that wanted that and half that didn't want that. So we have taken a very traditional approach to the way that you would do that. You can partition the estimates, and then there is an import method for importing pieces of the estimate into a single consolidated estimate once each of those pieces is complete. Through the audit trails, we also give you the ability to track who did what and when. So you can actually, again, use the filter tree as a way of filtering, which pieces of the estimate were done by Bob, which pieces were done by Sheila, and you can also then start to, see what the changes were that they made, so you can refine that down beyond just who it was, but when they made the change, what those changes were. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And the question came in about, does the application run local to the desktop or on the cloud?
It's a desktop-based application, so the database in the back end is a SQL server. That can run anywhere or be anywhere. More often than not, a company will put that on a centralized server, and then the product is a desktop application. We do have a number of customers that are running it through a virtual machine environment, and it does run just fine in VMs. So if you want to virtualize your desktops, it does support that, but it is a desktop application.
Okay, and then a question came in, can multiple quantities in the model be tied to the same assembly?
Yes, you would have to make multiple passes at the assembly. So you would pick the items that you want, answer the questions that those apply to, and then I didn't go into this, but you can retake off the assembly and pick any additional objects that you want to tie to that assembly. So it's a multi-pass approach. Pick what you want, map it, apply it, pick the assembly again, pick the objects that you want to now pick, and then retake off the assembly. And there is no limit to the number of those that you can do.
Okay, and then someone asked, does this use a Navisworks license in order for the DESTINI Estimator 2.0 version to work?
So the 2D takeoff does not require a Navisworks license. The 3D model integration does require a Navisworks license. It requires at minimum a simulate license, although we're in discussions with Autodesk about whether we can change that down a license type. So it may end up being that we provide you with the Navisworks window without needing a Navis simulate license. But currently it requires simulate or higher.
Okay, and then is any of the 2D takeoff interface dynamic, like links?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
I'm not sure if I do either. Seth, if you're still on, could you clarify what you mean by that?
If you check, maybe while he's typing it, if you tie a cost to a 2D takeoff item, and then you go back and change the 2D takeoff, you modify the area, you modify the length, you add the count, it will automatically update that quantity within the estimate. So in that sense, it's linked and it is live. If that's what you mean, the answer is yes.
So Seth clarified, do reference detail links work to take a user from plan to detail?
If they are set up in the PDF that way, yes. We are not doing anything special within Estimator to take advantage of things that aren't in the PDF. Okay.
Seth, I hope that answers your question.
It also does support multi-page PDFs, so I didn't really show this, but you can, in fact, the one I have is a multi-page. There is a button at the top. You can navigate to a page. One of the things that we're working on right now is the ability to quickly go backwards and forwards between one page and another. So if the elevation's on page 67 and the plan is on page 22, you don't want to keep going page next. You want a really quick way. So we are working on some enhancements around navigating within a multi-page PDF. So to your point, if you had a section and a detail, you could quickly go backwards and forwards. That is something that we're working on right now.
Okay, thank you. And then can you make changes on the Excel dashboard so that it would backfeed into the estimate?
Currently not. No, the estimate is the estimate, and the Excel file is kept in sync with the estimate. The changes you make on the Excel file currently do not go back into the estimating system. So if you make a change in the estimate, it will update the data in the Excel file, but not vice versa. Let me throw out another one. Obviously this is a relatively new product. It was commercially launched last year. Sun had been using it for over a year when we commercially launched it, so it's not, brand new, but it is new. And we have lots of people with lots of requests, and one of the things that we're very open to doing is listening. We can't guarantee that we're going to do everything that everybody asks, but we obviously feel like this product has a lot of interest, and we feel like it has a lot of opportunity to make a difference in the market. So if anybody has questions, we'd love to set up a go-to meeting and listen to some of your questions or listen to some of your suggestions and take those on board. All of the features that we add into both of our products come through user requests. It's something that we've done for a long time. It's something we're very proud of. It's something that we believe keeps you relevant. So if that's something of interest, please reach out to us, schedule a time, and we'd love to hear what your ideas are.
And then the last question I think we're going to have today is, can an estimate be exported out to Excel, have changes made, and then re-import into Estimate?
Yes, it can. So we have import and export to and from Excel.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Stuart. Thank you, everyone, for attending.